Record on this computer. Okay, we're good to go. So welcome to this session. I will start by sharing the screen here. See if I can get the right window. Do you see my screen on the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thanks. I'll go to presentation mode then. So what we're going to present today, Byung and myself, is a ONAP streamlining the process. And if I go to the next slide, and hopefully you see antitrust notice, policy notice, you know all about this. Go to the next one. If you wonder why I'm using this template, it's like I didn't really like the new the proposed one, and I really like this one from last DNTF. So being a bit conservative here. So this is a workshop on streamlining the ONAP process based on the new mission statement that was approved by the TSC a couple of weeks ago. So we're just going to show the new mission statement, do a short recap of what I've said and what we've talked about for quite a long time now. I won't dwell on that. That will be really snappy. Then I would like to talk about the right sizing, the ambition level. And then we're going to show some inspiration from other open source projects. And the claim is that open source has evolved when it comes to presenting itself, and the standard for what you're supposed to show to the industry and the community has gone up. So the marketing has changed, and then some suggestions, and a discussion here at the end. Doesn't have to be at the end. You're free to sort of ask questions during the presentation, make comments. We have an hour, so I think we'll be able to run this. Maybe not in all details, but still. Byung, anything you would like to add to this?
No. That's
okay.
Fine.
Thanks. So the new ONAP mission statement says that ONAP is an open source project containing a set of autonomous components. So I highlighted those words. And then for, as usual, orchestration, management, and automation of network and edge computing services for network operators, cloud providers, and enterprises. So the big change here is going from platform to project, and to go from sub-projects to autonomous components. The components are designed by self-organizing projects, evolving in dialogue with code consumers, as well as adhering to ONAP's global requirements and best practices. We really want to sort of have some standards, some quality standards that ONAP complies to, and the ONAP components comply to. To increase the value of the components to the consumers, use cases are identified to guide the bundling of components into packages and integrating components for proof of concept demonstrations. So we're not saying that these use cases and the work that's done there is automatically useful sort of in a production environment. They're for demo, they're for proof of concept, they're for being picked up and as an inspiration. That's the way we see that. And then last but not least, ONAP is also an industry collaboration to define, describe, and evolve a reference architecture. And it has served that purpose for many years now. People are referring to ONAP real-time policy-driven orchestration management and automation of physical, virtual, and cloud-native network functions. And the cloud-native has sort of been added here as compared to the original text. So this is what was approved, and I think many said that we are already sort of adhering to this. The platform aspect has gone down, and the specific components and the use cases are in play. Then I will use one slide here that was presented to the TSP from Bell Canada, and this one, how we are using ONAP, and we got also other inspirational presentations from our stakeholders in the TSC. It's been quite interesting to listen to those testimonies, how they're using ONAP. I just picked one picture here because I think it hits the nail on the head. That they're using a selection of components. They're using that in their infrastructure, and they're also adding third-party products and in-house development. And they're using it for a couple of use cases. And that's sort of not to be seen as a platform then, but to components in the environment that has been specified by the operator, in this case, Bell Canada. Okay, moving on. Just wanted to show this architecture because it shows that in the London release we have a set of components that work together. We are pushing for the platform platform release any day soon, and there is a lot of work that has gone into this, a lot of thinking, architecturally, technical, and we want to continue that. At the same time, there are gaps, so there are holes in the among the projects, and it's tough to sort of keep the platform together. Then about the ONAP benefits to the industry, I think it's important to present that, and Byung, I'll leave the word to you for this slide.
Sure. This is ONAP. We, as a platform, before we change the name, ONAP has shown end-to-end network automation to the industry, that's for sure. And many operators, vendors, enterprises, they joined ONAP, have learned how service network automation works on the VM cloud native environment for their VNF, PNF, CNF, or the network services, WAN slicing, and recently, and end-to-end services. They learn through ONAP. That's why ONAP as a platform is a good the showcase how the network automation is done. And now the operators, vendors, and enterprise wants to select and apply ONAP function to their portfolio. So they learn it and they play with it, and they want to bring the ONAP function into their portfolio. And there's some issues and friction. So, and as from the beginning, and no one needs to take ONAP as a whole. So they want pick and choose, and there's some difficulties. So, and next bullet, in ONAP, there are numerous valuable use cases Agnes mentioned, and leverages coordinated clusters of ONAP component functions, such as these, to achieve their objectives. This is not a full list, and such as network slicing, WAN slicing, closed loop, and SC-based NS, VNF orchestration, Helm-based, CNF orchestration, ASD-based. They are great accomplishments, that's for sure. And now what are you gonna do next? So our goal is to continue support those use cases more efficiently for use in commercial production environment and portfolio, commercial environment, not just open source level, and they want to move on. So we expect the industry wants to pick and choose design the ONAP component function, and they can swap some of the ONAP function with their own functions and integrate those functions into their portfolios seamlessly without bringing whole ONAP platform. That's we expect, and we heard and we learned. So ONAP streamlining, the Magnus described, which drives individual components and clusters of components guided by use cases, will enable the flexible and dynamic function adoption by the industry. That's we try to make it happen. So these days, as a note, ONAP stakeholders are thinking about connecting dots, and ONAP, OREN, Nephew, AMCO, and other community for larger objectives. So some of them, they want to reuse the function, selected ONAP function, and also they want to do functional delegation, and for example, Nephew and others. So this conversation happens. So under these circumstances, ONAP streamlining is more desirable, and that's we believe, and that's we're gonna talk about in subsequent slide. Magnus, back to you.
Thank you. You've seen these slides, but we reworded those a bit. So this is also part of the talking about what we've said before. So individual components should be run by self-organizing teams. We have that in the mission now, mission statement, and the teams dictate their own processes and timelines. They are centers of excellence. They know most about this, and they're like good open source teams are sort of knowledgeable and proud of what they put together, and they have a flexible dialogue with users. There is some continuous development and responsive deliverables, and we've seen that has been a bit difficult given the platform, but on the other hand, a few releases ago, we actually introduced this flexible releases, pre-releases of the components. Then there are clusters of components guided by use cases and bringing greater value than individual components. They're useful in marketing, they're proof of concepts, and that's also included now in the mission statement. Then when it comes to platforms, and we don't have to dwell on that. Usual arguments, no commercial uptake, no smooth upgrade, which is of course very important in a commercial system or pre-commercial as well. And then sets expectations for a scope way beyond what can be expected from a normal open source community. You could say that the marketing for ONAP, the initial marketing for ONAP was very successful. It built up expectations to run this platform, and that it would be sort of a standard piece of sort of all operators and enterprises network management. It's also based on a more corporate development mindset than you would find normally in open source. So we think that ONAP needs to get more agile and better at managing expectations. And when it comes to the right-sized ambition level, trying to be a bit provocative here, I hope it works. The individual components teams set the expectations. That's what we said before. I think also that proposals needs to be backed up with secure development resources. I think we've had a mismatch between people wanting things and people wanting to develop those things. We need to be sure that these components have a backup for the resources, and also that the use cases so good negotiates with the PTLs and with the teams even more than they've done so far. And then smooth interoperability is a benefit, but it's not the default. seems like we've treated it as a default that everything should work together. I don't think we will be able to uphold that. And I also think that we should treat documentation as best effort, complemented by contact information to the developer network, and also, and we'll get back to that, some sort of rules on how you do documentation. But basically, it's, well, sending the responsibility for documentation to the various components. And I think that's of course a setback. I mean, you really want to have a documentation that goes over all the components and over the platform, and that you can read and that explains everything. I think that burden is too high on a open source engagement. I think you need to also have contact with people who are working, and you can ask questions and you can get explanations that way to be able to do a real sort of all-inclusive documentation is really a very heavy work. Then when it comes to governance, you will see in the following, we are proposing more special interest groups and support, more sort of that kind than the sort of the more say governance type of process that we've seen so far. Maybe I should pause here and say, did I provoke anyone here? Anyone who disagrees?
Well, no,
Yes, we are provoked.
We support that effort. I just wanted to get your thoughts on two things.
Yeah.
One is the typical mindset when you're trying to acquire capability. The evaluator wants to get maximum bang for the buck, and they want single point of administration, single pane of glass. So they end up bundling together a lot of capabilities when evaluating technology and acquiring technology. But when it comes to deploy, interoperability with the existing system then demands breaking all that one package into multiple packages because you don't need something. And that's what your previous slide kind of mentioned, and by kind of stressed, that we can't really solve that problem because the technology evaluators will still think the same way. Can I get the most for my buck? How are we now making these smaller autonomous teams at the right size to offer those capability that does not suffer the same fate as what we saw with the ONAP? And then what kind of features that would feed in? What's the process so that maybe we started right, but we might veer away from the path that we should have taken?
Yeah, I can start. I think that you're right. I mean, we should have some transparency in how the groups work. I think the sort of the typical cliche here is that you have teams that are 2 pizza teams, and you can feed with 2 pizzas. Well, American big pizzas then, but anyway. And I think we should really see that they're not growing into a platform by themselves. That's for sure. Otherwise, I think we will show some examples of other open source communities, how they're dealing with this, with sort of having special interest groups that goes in and sort of review or look at the different projects. I don't know, Byung, if you wanted to add anything on that.
No, not now. I think you can introduce one of the community. You can in the subsequent slide decks. Maybe after that we can rediscuss.
we can get back to that question again.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Agnes,
yeah,
before you move on,
please. Yeah.
I'm a bit concerned about the previous slide on bullet number 4, the documentation.
Yeah.
So kind of representing the Linux Foundation, I think different or history of other projects show that even the best quality code without proper documentation is not seeing a lot of adoption. So I understand what you're saying here about reducing the overhead of creating documentation, but I would rephrase it to focusing on some more skeleton documentation, like things like maybe each module will have to maintain kind of a getting started guide, API guide, and release notes with key features. But saying that documentation is best effort is, I think, kind of a shot in the foot, because over time it will make ONAP components unusable by new adopters. So I would request to reconsider the phrasing here and replacing it with skeleton level documentation or some other thing that will convey the message that there will be less documentation overhead, but still minimal documentation for the relevant parties, like consumers of the modules, will be available.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that, Rani. I think you're perfectly right. This is a bit sloppy saying it's best effort. We should have some quality marks, so some measurements to that the components have to adhere to. So I fully agree with that, and we will. I think that's a good comment.
Yeah, thanks. We can discuss offline the
Yeah.
exact phrasing and
Absolutely.
review.
Yeah, I'll come back to the special interest groups also on documentation. Okay, let's move on. So the slides we're showing now for inspiration here is the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and the CD Foundation. So they are open source projects that I think can help us navigate. And there are two things that I would like to highlight here. One is that there is sort of more modern graphics or more appealing websites. And well, does it matter? Well, yeah, if you're going to get the community excited, or you're going to get developers in, you really need to maybe think about that. And also, I think that what they're doing is they're showing the projects and the people. And the reason, I mean, from the beginning, ONAP was sort of a platform project with a more sort of governance attitude. And I think that the designers and the projects that we haven't really had the exposure that they deserve. So that's one thing. So let's have a look here. This is how it looks like in the CNCF. There is some bragging here on the first page you come to, and this is actually a video. I just did a screen capture here, but this is a video that goes on, and whether you like that or not, that's a matter of taste, but it gives an impression that things are happening here. This is sort of a cool place to be, and there is lots of people engaged in this. They also have this notion of graduated projects. I know that LFN has a similar sort of thing that you go in and say which projects are sort of have met certain quality criteria and maturity criteria, and they're sort of shown in this CNCF. There is also a sandbox and other type of projects. They also have this outreach with the CNCF ambassadors, and there's actually a picture of each of those, and but I didn't put that in here. But it shows that it's all over the world. You can easily find someone you can contact, you can get in touch with. So it's very much a people's network, as well as a technology network. And then there are what they call tags, technical advisory groups, on security, on storage, app delivery, network runtime, etc. And that's the reason for this is that the projects are quite sort of independent, and there is a need to get them sort of not unified but aligned. So those are the technical advisory groups. When it comes to CDA Foundation, so this snappy picture that you get when you get into the site, and they present the projects. They have sort of logos, and you can find sort of a direct access to the underlying projects. They also have special interest groups with the best practices, interop, events, software supply chain, ML ops, machine learning ops, and I think this gives them an impression that this is more of a sort of support. This is more of bringing the expertise in these areas to support and help. Sorry. They have technical initiatives, interop, reference architecture, software supply chain, and best practices. And then this is sort of another type of governance, if you will. And they have their ambassador cohort of 2023. They have people you can contact. They have an ambassador chair. And I don't know how well this works. I assume that everyone is on this chart has been sort of agreeing to be in here. And they're from different geographical areas. They're from academia. They're from different companies, and they're also sort of specific to, like one is for Jenkins, and they could be of different kinds. But they are sort of volunteering to answer questions and be that you can contact, and it also gives them sort of an exposure and an ability to put in their CVs that they're ambassadors for CD Foundation. That's probably something that they would put in their CV, and that would be helpful when they move on in their career. So again, what I said in the beginning, showing the people, showing the projects, and be less anonymous, sort of behind a platform. You look at the ONAP, it's a bit dated, and I'm not going to complain that it should be updated with a new mission statement, and I don't think Rookie of the Year 2018 is that hip anymore. So I mean, take my point. This is no criticism. I think we all agree we have to do something here, because the standard of what you meet when you go into an open source project has changed a lot since ONAP came up. So I think we need to be a bit more modern in that approach. So this is a proposal that we actually lift the different projects in ONAP to the LF networking level. And you can recognize the projects here on the left, and then the one on the right there, there's a mock-up sort of symbols and logos, except CPS that actually have a very good logo. Otherwise, Bjorn and myself, we made a mock-up here just to show you give a sense of what it could look like if you lift them up on network LF networking level, being components in their own right, and then maybe you see here we say by ONAP, so we group them together. They still have sort of a connection through ONAP, and they still have some requirements and global requirements and quality measures that they have to live up to. And possibilities to drop the by ONAP and just present them as projects in their own right. But we believe that there is also for the continuous sort of development here, and also for the relations there are between different ONAP projects. Byung, do you want to comment on any of this?
I'll address the additional comment in the next slide.
Yeah,
So.
right. Okay, please go ahead.
So this is for the ONAP streamlining. This is kind of an obstacle, observation, and challenges I collected from various the input, Mike Morris, Twine, and others. So basic analysis, ONAP components are designed for ONAP specific consumption. So this is ONAP component currently is for ONAP platform. And so instead of the component being graduate and matured and generally available for some purposes, an ONAP component becomes obsolete or unmaintained if ONAP does not have use cases. Right. So that's the reality. So as you can see from the London release, we removed many of the original ONAP projects. I reported last the DNTF and how many are the project gone. And so because if ONAP doesn't use it, regardless the component, individual component functionality is gone. So, and also second one, some of the ONAP component specific feature tend to be ignored. Let me explain. If the one particular component, they have a great idea, they want to refine their component further and further. But if those requirement enhancement are not used by other ONAP component, those features tend to be ignored. So that means it's kind of not encouraging, and they said kind of discourage the that kind of effort. So that's I observed. Mike Morris mentioned about that too, and also the point is ONAP component function should be used by not only ONAP but also non-ONAP. Currently, is not the case. So component design should be generic and extensible. So it enable to be used in non-ONAP. So that means more audience and more use cases, more the popularity. So if components are generally applicable, then more potential gain, more traction. So that's the line, and also currently ONAP component dependencies and couplings are to other ONAP component are in ONAP specific way. They working together, and the Magnus showed architecture how the component talk each other and the diagram, but they are dependent each other. But it's the dependency is more both synthetic and semantic. Very sometimes coupling is high. So numerous intra-ONAP component interface communication ONAP specific too. So there are some effort, limited effort. We try to use a standardized the API such as SC Mono and ASD and 3GPP. For example, VFC and the NFU component can be replaced by a vendor provide NFU easily, because the ONAP NFU at VFC, they use the standard SD Mono API and semantically and syntactically. So that's why ONAP can talking to a vendor NFU freely. So we should promote that kind of the standardization more and more for other ONAP components. So, and also during the ONAP streamlining efforts, making each ONAP component standalone will highlight the potential users, not only ONAP, existing one, and also the non-ONAP. Magnus showed the Bell Canada case. They chose some of the ONAP component for their use cases. From there, they evolve more. So if ONAP component is standalone, I think the more telco operator and vendor, they can take a single component or as needed, some crossover component. So without taking whole the ONAPs. That's the some observation. And next, please.
Yep. Here you go.
So to make it happen, the one point deviating from standards makes integration with other systems really problematic. So I experienced some of the SC during the SC alignment when I talking to the external VNFM, and we had a heck of time to the integration. The interface wise, we're using standard, but the security and all kind of integration only using at that time using AAF, and then other vendor VNFM has no idea about AAF, so integration was horrible. So that's why luckily now the OEM team, they support service mesh and other the ingress-based security. That means integration will be much smoother. So anyway, aligning with the standard where possible should be global requirement. So that's what SECOM drives. So any deviation, they should invent a way how we extend the deviation and then still enable the standard-based. That's the one thing. So another collection was component Helm chart in OEM may need to be written to deploy a component individually. So we experience this not just for Helm chart version and those things, the tags, the different each company. OEM, the Helm chart is good for OEM deployment, but it's not necessarily compatible with the vendors and operators, their operation in their portfolio. And in some cases, the vendor maintain a completely different set of the Helm chart. They take the source code and abandon all the Helm chart related, they rebuild for their own purposes. So if we pack it on a component individually and then make it more the concrete way of deploying the single component, maybe it's much easier. We can provide easier the adoption, and that's the one other point. And also vendor operator specific security and logging requirement could be different. Each vendor, they have their own requirement. So it causes integration issues. So the current the security based on service mesh ingress, kicklock, and also the SECOM provide logging standard format, and those things should be maintained. So regardless, we make it the individual ONAP component standalone, we should follow the same the global requirement for those things. Let's make it integration much easier. And also timeline cadence of ONAP release inflexible. And the reason is ONAP, they creating the release per entire platform. So for example, Montreal, London, that's for entire platform. So we cannot create the release in Jira for particular component, for example. If component, they want to go further, they want to do folders, then they want to add additional feature officially, but they cannot because it's not part of the London. So that means they usually are doing some kind of branching strategy. Temporarily, they put into some branch and until the next release, Jira available, but it's not, it's very cumbersome. So anyway, it's not aligned with the current ONAP CMO. So that means some cases, the PTL, and then they to overcome this, and they creating artificial split. And I'm gonna put this feature in this, and this release, I put the this release. That's kind of a little bit cumbersome. Anyway, we want to more flexible. So if you package manage the component individually, and they can create additional the release, each component separately. So that is a more dynamic handling of the release for each component. Next, please. This is kind of a brainstorming. What's the ONAP component streamlining target? So I think I introduced this to the architecture, the review at DNTF previously. But anyway, now that we have some Magnus draw a picture of this by ONAP, the slogan, and to make ONAP component more individual. We want modular independent management. That means a standalone component we support. And we support interface abstraction, loose coupling. And also including standardization where possible. So in case we want to swap the component, and then we still support because interface is abstracted and loosely coupled. So for that sense, extensibility, interchangeability should be supported. And another point in scalability, in the system, a component can be added and updated and deleted without disruption. That's kind of an idea. So they can compose the component by their use cases, and they can use case changes, and they can remove and add or some update component like a more flexible way. So, and autonomous self-management, each component can manage in autonomous fashion. So that's one thing. So as I previously mentioned about design for general use, so we design component not just for ONAP, but also not ONAP consumers. That's why it's more the appeal to the wider audiences. And again, conformance to industry security and logging, regardless component is standard or not. We want to emphasize the standard and the security and logging should be supported. So anyway, so once this component, the standalone, and then they can provide their own function, advertise their functions. So some user want to see what this function do and documentation, and then I can give her README document style. They can provide all the detail, how to link, how to access, what kind of function they can get from this particular component, how to compose. Those things we can, provide it. And then they can, based on that learning, they can select the best component for a particular task in system. Anyway, so it provides responsive integration, delivery, but ONAP still can provide reference automation for coordination. They know how to link these components for the particular use case and task that they can still provide as a reference implementation. ONAP still providing some those orchestration, leveraging these individual subcomponents. Next, please. I think I'm done. Back to you.
I just wanted to make a comment here. If you're sort of missing some project, if you think they're I tried to find as many as possible and put them up here. It's not an extensive sort of it's a list of components. There could be more. Just
Don't feel bad, your party is not there.
Yeah.
Just
right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So this is also sort of a food for thought that we could work with more special interest groups as a governance model. So maybe turn TC into technical coordination and governance, kind of a kind of a committee that doesn't really run, but more see to that the ONAP rules are obeyed, and that there is a fair coordination, and also to Rani's point of documentation, also sort of maybe have some kind of oversight that it's together with what we I'll come to that later in the list. Architecture and operability, that's sort of something that still is needed to obey to the ONAP architecture and find out if the interop works. That could also be on LFN level, actually. Security could also be on LFN level. That's what we propose here. Why shouldn't the same security rules and the same expertise be sort of applicable on other LFN projects? And also common practices could also be on LFN level. Modeling, we think is typically of interest group that you would like to keep. from a committee to an interest group. Then the LFN documentation consistency. There's also a proposal to have some rules and some sort of a style guide, also a checklist on what you need to put in the documentation, and a skeleton on this. That could be on ONAP level, could also be LFN level actually. And then technical outreach, something that I've spent some time on, sort of reaching out to STOs and other open source activities. That could also be a special interest group. And then last year, I have some details on assuming that we keep coordinated by ONAP releases, sort of ONAP releases, even when the platform has been discontinued. We've done some continued review of release management tasks that David McBride was leading a bit before, when we made some streamlining and yeah, making it a bit easier. So this is for further streamlining, and I've sort of proposed this in the following slides, but they're quite sort of detailed. So I think at this point, maybe we can open up for questions and comments before we consume all the rest of the time for a detailed explanation of the different release management tasks. Are there any?
Could you explain the importance of, you mentioned APIs and standards, right? So once you break down a platform into individual components, how do you decide what APIs that particular one unit, atomic unit, needs to have? And how do we ensure that those things are well published? So when it comes to creating a release or interop, those APIs known. And I'm thinking what ORAN Alliance did with the base station, breaking down into pieces and created APIs, interfaces, etc. You plan to do that exercise before moving in that direction.
Can I pass that to you?
Yeah. So
which is there a special slide you want to show? No, maybe
yeah,
not.
I think that we can talk about this one. So
okay.
but that's so we didn't have this standard case for the ORAN in ONAP, but yet, but there's the O1 and A1 now they use the standard one. But what my example here, for example, when we develop NFVO, and also China Mobile team developed a VFC, for example, they know the available standard API and the models from Etsy. So they adopted. So that's why when they design a model, the module, component, and function, and we declare, and we are using this industry standard APIs and model for the implement the particular function defined by the industry. That's why that's the process. I think the we follow same the concept when we standalone, make the component standalone alone, and we revise we analyze their current interfaces, and they already described their existing interface at the outcome, and they also some diagram, and then the interface, the specification. So we we analyze this and how to make it more standard. If there is the standard modeling and interfaces we're gonna adopt, and then otherwise we promote the current ONAP, some particular function, the API and model, we promote it to as industry standard. So that's the kind of effort we have to handle at the same time. That's my view. I'm not sure, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's the way I would like to see it. somewhere universally those APIs and standards are known, and we don't need to create new ones, right?
Right.
If we can use existing one. This way, each component have certain type of inputs, and it provides certain type of standard outputs. That makes it easy to break down platform into components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I
so-
highly suggest that the standardization of the API model that supporting both synthetic and semantic both combination. And then I experienced in ONAP when we're introducing an FEO and the VNFM, because we're using standard, industry standard, that any vendor, they can substitute that function with their own function. We saw that. So we saw operator and vendor, they can use their own the component just without any other hiccup, too much hiccup, except the security. So that's why this is a must. But as you said, we use we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We scout if there's the standard interface for SO, standard interface UI, SDCs, then we're gonna take it. Otherwise, if we know they don't have it, then we promote this as a standard. That's one of the specification. When we started the ASD in ONAP, we built the ASD specification. There's no standard. So we built it, and we are in process of promoting that ASD specification in ORAN. So that's the kind of effort, bi-directional effort should happen.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
right. That's a good example where you can also go the other way around, having open source as inspiration, showing that it's possible to use it, and then try to influence the standard by that. And maybe I should, if I can get the.
So one
Yeah.
question, Magnus, on
Yeah,
the
please.
service release.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what I've seen, and I've spent about 20 years in a professional services working for large communication providers. And what they used to do internally, they will create a service release, whether it's a voice service, wireless service, high-speed data. And that service release would be made out of multi-party components, routers, switches, management, all kind of stuff at a very different release levels, but they will track, and the tracking require integration testing or solution testing. And that's what they followed. Service release X for video delivery may have components from 20 different companies. But once they said release is available, that implied that all these components from different companies, they work well together. So there's no broken link there. In breaking down ONAP as a platform, it just goes back to the importance of assuring that these components do work well together. That means integration testing will be paramount.
Yeah, and I think that also is, I agree on that. I think the architecture and interop here is important. I mean, the architecture subcommittee being evolved into SIG would have to take up some of that responsibility that was sort of done in the platform, in the process, in the platform process, and try to work more with interop questions, and but also listed by Byung before here, some work to do there. But also the ambition level is sort of that. Now, hopefully, we can get help from users and also help from SDOs that will then sort of work with us on this APIs, and I think we've seen that before, that's possible.
Yeah, one comment is even though we making the component standalone, so there is some Magnus mentioned clusters of the ONAP component. The meaning is some use case require several component work together, like some of the. So this integration testing is for particular feature. So when they do provide feature and then use cases, they said, I want this component I want to select. I want to enhance, I'm going to select it for higher objectives. So that means those things has to be tested. So that means it's not just platform level test, whole thing. They just focus group. And then I want to test this feature and these components are selected and how they work together. So that's why I mentioned about we have to talk about version controlling and then also compatibility. So yeah, outcome and some SIG arc we need to address. And when they review the component and the features, we have to make sure they're gonna work together. Okay.
Yeah, and again, this is just ideas of, I mean, we have to work that out, and I'll be happy to get any input or sort of objections or additions or anything on this list. The most important thing is to try to raise the question of the governance being a bit different than before. I just wanted to show you, I took this release management tasks, and some have been removed as part of the updated release plan. And then so on these slides, and you can check afterwards if you want to go into the details, we are proposing some changes, some sort of keeping, but maybe changing a bit of these tasks. The red one are already removed. Green ones are simplified or moved as part of the previous review, and then the purple texture is sort of for the part of this proposal. So the request for architectural subcommittee review we think should be kept, but for the architecture and interop SIG, and even that could possibly be on LFN level. Documentation, we talked about that previously, change to this documentation consistency SIG, where you can make sort of rules and templates and so on how the documentation in the projects and possibly in the use cases should look like. Then release planning template, is simplified, maybe need to be further simplified. If we keep the releases, I think it's makes sense to have some kind of visibility what is planned until a certain release date, but that could also be relaxed. And then the next one, verify information in documentation tracking page, sort of maybe move to this SIG for documentation consistency. Review license scan issues. Yes, that's useful. We should keep that. I put SIG modeling. Maybe that was a mistake. It's probably not that SIG. Then it's the next one. I propose to put the SIG modeling, sort of keep the data models. And then complete architectural subcommittee review. Yes, and keep that as part of the SIG for architecture and interop. When it comes to this color coding of ensuring that PTLs complete the handshake with requirement owners, I think the various components are then responsible for their requirements. So it's that even, and it could also be delegated to the use case owners if you want requirements on use cases. But it is not any longer, I think, something that has to be challenged on sort of a ONAP level. API changes, of course, we should keep up that. That is mandatory to show that you're changing APIs. Test coverage is also important for quality reasons. They're more when it comes to OOM review, maybe that should be removed. Assigning GRI issues for the release, I think also could be removed. Again, then preliminary documentation, again, sort of a different way of handling documentation. And yeah, I don't have to go through all the details here. You can go in and think about this and see if you agree with this. And we have to go through and review that anyway in more detail. We are coming towards the top of the hour here. I think we are out of time.
Shankar has his hand up.
Okay, sorry, I don't see hands. Shankar, go ahead, please.
I don't know, do we have time?
No.
I saw
Yeah.
a note saying we can discuss it later.
Yeah, half a minute.
At the chat, I offer we can discuss at the outcome and or offline. So Shankar, if
Okay.
you we can, I give you a section for the in outcome next week. Okay, if you can.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah, so it is time for us to, move on over to the town hall portion, but
Sure.
I just wanted to say that this was a really, really interesting presentation.